All right. Hey there, everybody. Welcome. Hope everybody's having a fantastic day so far. My name is Laura Bolio, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Holistiplan, and I will be co-hosting with Debbie Taylor here today. We also have Caroline Taylor joining us. So if this is your very first time at a Holistiplan webinar, you are in for a very special treat. Let me tell you, I had the privilege of actually previewing the slides. This topic and this content is so incredible. You are in for an absolute treat. So as always, we are thrilled to talk about the problem with large IRAs leveraging Holistiplan with none other than Debbie Taylor herself. So with that, I would love to introduce to you Debbie Taylor. We call her Queen Debbie here at Holistiplan. Debbie is the founder, wealth advisor, and lead tax planner at Taylor Financial Group, which is a full-service woman-owned wealth management firm. She is a highly sought-after speaker who we know and love. And every month she teaches our monthly masterclass where hundreds of advisors tune in and learn from Debbie. So with that, I would love to hand it off to Debbie and Caroline.
That's great. Well, thank you, Laura, and welcome everybody today. Future Holistiplan subscribers is how we like to think of all of you. And as Laura mentioned, I have my daughter Caroline on with me, and we're going to demo the Tax Report 2.0, which was just released from Holistiplan to great acclaim. And so Caroline is really excited about that. So we're going to demo that today. And we're going to go through some 5 tax gotchas and a great way to be thinking about distribution planning, Roth conversion work, tax planning work. And we're going to talk at the end about a project at my office that folks are really excited about. It was actually Caroline's idea, or at least she's taking credit for it, wink, wink, and a way to sort of increase assets, increase wallet share. We touched upon it a little bit last month, but we're coming back to it again this month for those of you who weren't with us last month, or to just drive home the point and add some new ideas to that. And so today, here's our agenda. And those of you who have been with us before, you know that we always pack tons of content in here. I always keep bonus material for the very end to reward my intrepid listeners. So stay with us to the very end. And with that, then let's hop in. And so the first thing I wanted us to address is our little poll, right? Is do most non-spouse beneficiaries have to completely draw down their inherited IRAs by the end of the 10-year period? And this should be a little bit of a softball question. Those of you, or if you were Holistiplan subscribers, we have been covering these new rules, particularly over the last couple of months. The IRS released guidance in July, and we had an extensive webinar addressing that guidance where we had almost 1,000 listeners, and we walked through what the IRS was saying in July and how to handle that with your clients. And so anyway, with that, then I'm curious what the results of our poll are. Excellent. We've got a very good crowd. We have 93% of you got the right answer to that, which is phenomenal. So good. I'm thrilled. That means we're all on the same page hopping in. And so let's go to our 5 tax gotchas then. So just to take a second on here. So when we have folks coming to us, one of the things that I think it's so important is to do what we call distribution planning. And distribution planning can cover a number of things. Yes, it's Roth conversions, but it also can mean taking money out of traditional IRAs in low income years. And it also can mean figuring out that puzzle of Roth conversion, taxable accounts, and traditional IRAs, and just figuring out overall how the money should be coming out of those accounts, when, what dollar amounts. So it's a little bit more nuanced than most folks realize. And to be honest, the practice, for the most part, doesn't account for the nuances. Okay. And so one of the things we're going to talk about today then is how to set this up with your clients, how you should be thinking about it and communicating, and then what our process is as far as recommending Roth conversions to clients and how Holistiplan is such a big part of that process. And so the first thing to think about is what are the clients up against, right? And these are the 5 tax gotchas. So I wrote an article about this years ago. It's probably one of my favorite pieces to share with prospects when they meet with me so that I can demonstrate the value of tax planning and how it can make a difference for them, for their partners, and for their beneficiaries. So you're talking about sort of like multiple layers of how tax planning can make a difference. And these are the 5 critical areas where tax planning can make a difference. And so let's hop into the first one is large traditional retirement accounts create large RMDs, which are a burden for life. I refer to large traditional IRAs as kryptonite. So when prospects come to me and they're like all proud of themselves and they have this like really large traditional IRA and nobody told them, even though they have like 4 financial advisors, right? Nobody told them that they were going to have a train wreck of an issue because they had such a large traditional IRA, right? And that I think is one of the most frustrating things for these clients when they show up and they have this 2, 3, $4 million traditional IRA, or maybe even larger, and they might have multiple financial advisors, and nobody explained to them that they were, creating a disaster scenario. And so sometimes we're the first person on the scene to have this conversation with the client. And what it means then is you essentially have to educate them and cajole them a little bit because nobody had this conversation and they've been so convinced sometimes for decades that building up these traditional IRA accounts was the right thing to do and these traditional 401ks. And sometimes they'll say, hey, like nobody told us, or Roth IRAs weren't available, 20 years ago when I first started doing this, or 30 years ago. And so it's a little bit of a balance because you want to shake them out of their complacency. You need to educate them. But you also need to be supportive and understand that for many of them, they didn't know about the options. They didn't have the options earlier on in their career. And many of them still don't understand the ramifications of having that large traditional IRA. All right. And so the first thing we need to educate is large traditional retirement accounts create a large RMDs, which are a burden for life. And within our office, the cutoff is usually at about $1.5 million. And what I'm saying then, if somebody has or could have, and that's important, could have a traditional IRA that reaches $1.5 million, then that requires your intervention. And the more that they have exceeded that balance, 2 million, 2, 3 million, 4 million, 5, the more they've exceeded that balance, the more aggressive your intervention needs to be. But I will tell you $1.5 million now, or could be. And let me explain the could be part. If you've got somebody coming to you and they're like 45 years old and they have a $500,000 or $600,000 traditional 401k/IRA, you might say, hey, I don't need to worry about that, right? That doesn't violate Debbie's rule of thumb of $1.5 million. But if you do the basic math, that person, particularly if they continue contributing to that plan, right, they will have $1.5 million, 2 million, or possibly even more if you don't stabilize the situation or stop the bleeding, is how I call it. And so that's how you need to think about it: is do they have $1.5 million, or could they have $1.5 million? And we're going to demonstrate some ways to approach it for those younger clients to make sure that they don't make those mistakes and have those regrets. And then, of course, for those clients where it's too late and they've already built that retirement account, then what we need to do with that. So number one of the 5 tax gotchas, number one is large traditional retirement accounts. That is your kryptonite, okay? And we need to deal with those, right? Okay. The second of the 5 tax gotchas is beware of rising taxes and the expiration of the TCJA. Now, we have been talking about the expiration of the TCJA now for several years. If you remember, the TCJA was put in place in December of 2017. We knew that they were significant sunsetting provisions at the end of 2025. But back in 2017, 2025 seemed like a decade away. Like, who needs to worry about this, right? It's literally almost a decade away. Like, let the party continue. And so for several years now, we've been beating this drum saying, hey, 2025 is right around the corner. Like, we need to be dealing with this. And of course, we were sort of a lone voice in the valley because we still had a few years. But now, all of a sudden, 2024, we're getting near the end. And between the presidential election coming up and the sunsetting of the TCJA in a little bit over the year from now, there is a steady drumbeat of tax conversation, questions: where are taxes going? What's going to happen to TCJA? Even so recently as Trump yesterday on the campaign trail saying that he was going to reinstate the SALT deduction while he was, of course, campaigning in New York, right? And so every single day, our presidential candidates are talking about what they're going to do with the tax code. And every single day, the Wall Street Journal is covering, different questions. Like I think last week, they talked about the expiration of the TCJA and how that would affect specific counties in the United States. And they did it sort of as a case study. So they're like, oh, if you live in this county in this Midwestern state, here's how the expiration of the TCJA would affect you. If you lived in this county in some high tax state, here's how the expiration of the TCJA would affect you. And so what you're seeing is this rehashing, this campaign talk, and it's all the steady drumbeat going into this next 14 months. You've got a presidential election in 2 months. That is going to give us a lot of visibility into directionally what we can start expecting, all right, at least directionally. And then we know a year from now, a little over a year from now, the TCJA will sunset it will sunset, okay? And the Democrats and Republicans are going to have to sit at a table together and hash out what's going to stay and what's going to go. And there are very different opinions between the parties as to what should stay and what should go. And so the point here then is taking a step back is taxes are probably the lowest they will be for your lifetime and your client's lifetime. Okay. I feel pretty confident saying that. And most predictors would say the same thing is that taxes are at a historically low level. For the first time ever, interest payments on the debt are actually larger than defense spending, which some say is a predictor of fallen societies, right? Fallen regimes. I'm not sure if I'm that doomsday about it, but it actually is a very important data point that interest on the debt is now our second largest payment, only to entitlements. So we've got a real debt issue. We've got annual deficits, and we've got historically low tax rates. And so there's a couple ways to be thinking about this, and I'm not trying to be overly alarmist, but what I'm saying is tax rates are probably not going any lower than they are right now. And then we have TCJA sunsetting, and at the very least, a chance that particularly for those higher income people, taxes could be going up. So when you talk to your clients and you're thinking about what the risks are ahead of you, you need to think about the fact that taxes are historically low. We have debt to GDP ratio that is the highest debt to GDP ratio in peacetime, okay? Only to be matched by World War II, which was a completely exceptional situation. We've got annual deficit, and we have a TCJ expiring. So a lot of risk here. And part of what your job is as a financial advisor is to help manage tax policy risk. And there's certainly plenty of risk, particularly for those higher income clients. And so the second of the 5 tax gotchas then is we've got to be aware of potentially rising taxes, income and estate taxes, by the way. So that's the other thing, income taxes and estate taxes. And for years, we didn't worry so much about estate taxes. But now, again, those are coming back on the table as something to worry about. Good. The third of the 5 tax gotchas is beware of the widow's penalty and late stage taxes is what I call it. And so here's the challenge is that many of your clients have become very complacent because they're currently in that 22 to 24% tax bracket, which has become incredibly wide as a result of the TCJA. And many folks are like, yeah, like I'm okay with that. 22, 24% tax bracket, we all got to pay some taxes, don't we? And I agree with that. Here's the challenge is that if you have a couple, one of them will die. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't think about this. It's amazing to me how many times we've sat in meetings and he's an engineer, he's a retired doctor, right? And she might be highly educated as well. And yet nobody's thinking about the fact that one of them is going to pass and the other one is going to be filing single. And the surviving partner, when filing single, can add anywhere from 8 to 10% onto the tax rate. So now all of a sudden, that comfortable 24%, and don't we have to pay some taxes, Debbie, right? That comfortable 24% When filing single, now for that widow could be 35 or 37%. And by the way, I'm not even talking about the expiration of the TCJA. And if there's an expiration of the TCJA, it could be 39.6%. And who knows what else could sneak in there. And so the widows, the surviving partners, it is a completely different game for them. The tax code is very punishing to that surviving partner. And by the way, their hands are tied behind their back because they often then have Social Security, which of course they have to take. They have those RMDs coming off of those large IRAs, which again, they basically have to take. There's only really 2 or 3 ways that you can decrease those RMDs once they start, and you're very limited by those tactics. And so, even if you've got a couple that is feeling very comfortable and it's like, hey, we don't really need tax planning. We're good here. What are you talking about these 5 tax gotchas, right? It's like, fine, you might be good. But when something happens to one of you, the surviving partner is going to have a tremendous burden on their hands. And I'm not even talking about rising taxes right now. I'm talking about even under today's tax code, which again is historically favorable to all of us. All right. Oh, and let's not forget also, with those higher taxes and higher AGI and higher MAGI comes higher IRMA surcharges, right? And higher taxes because the AGI dependent deductions then also get decreased. So there's also a whole negative cascading effect for that surviving partner. And let's face it, nobody wants to leave their surviving partner worse off, right? Nobody feels good about, hey, we're filing at 24%, we're doing great. But when something happens to me, like my partner is sort of out of luck, right? Nobody wants to feel like they're leaving their loved ones, in a bad situation. All right. The fourth one, talking about leaving loved ones in a bad situation. So now we're worried about our widow and our surviving partner. And for many of your prospects and clients, they never thought about that until you told them about that. And now we've got courtesy of the Secure Act, and now the kids have a problem. The beneficiaries of that large IRA that your clients couldn't spend through if they tried, because that's how they got that large IRA to begin with, is they lived within their means, right? So they're not going to change that now. They're going to continue to live within their means. And the goal was to leave that large IRA to their children. And somehow intuitively, they knew it wasn't a problem. I mean, do they know what a stretch IRA is? No, probably not. But they never read that this was a problem. They were never warned that this is a problem. And so on some level, they knew, hey, we can't spend this whole IRA, that 3 or 4 million or whatever the number is, and that's going to go to the kids. And that's a nice little legacy, right? That's a nice little inheritance for the kids. Well, thanks to 2019, the Secure Act, that is not going to work out. And so people are just learning and just understanding that now their kids are also going to be out of luck because they're going to have to take those 10-year, that they have to draw down that entire IRA in 10 years. We also know that in July, the IRS finally issued its guidance. And now those children will also have to take RMDs during that 10-year period. And so, again, when we think about the 5 tax gotchas, the notion here is to push your prospects out of a sense of complacency. And even some of your clients, particularly if they have money in other places and maybe they're not so highly engaged with you, this is an opportunity for you to deepen that engagement, to increase your wallet share by saying, hey, we want to help you with these issues. But we need to have the other assets to come over here so that we can do the tax planning that you need. We need those assets here so we can see basis. We can see the values in real time. That's what makes the most sense. And so I will tell you, as a result of tax planning, we're able to get so much increased wallet share because this is such a significant differentiator. And it's very clear that you're delivering value that the clients can count on, right? Like tax savings year in and year out. And so this Secure Act now is creating a whole additional wrinkle for these clients. Again, many of them are not even aware of it or have heard something about it, but don't really understand it. And then again, it's your job to say, hey, here are some challenges. I'm going to help you solve these challenges. Just as an aside, and I wanted to tuck this in here, is FP Pathfinders has some nice charts on this. And they came out with their flow chart after the IRS guidance from July. And it's a great sort of logical order of how to handle the distributions from the inherited IRAs. They also have a chart of how to handle distributions from a second inherited IRA, right? And so high level, right? Very, very high level. Once those RMDs have started, they need to continue. So if the owner of the IRA started taking RMDs, then the beneficiary needs to continue those RMDs, mostly during that 10-year period, right? Unless it's a spouse or an eligible designated beneficiary fitting into one of that class of five categories, right? And then they can be accepted from the 10-year rule. But most folks don't fit into one of those five categories, right? It's within 10 years, your age is within 10 years of the IRA owner. It's being a spouse, it's being a minor child, it's being chronically ill or disabled. And remember, that's got to satisfy the Social Security definition, right? And so if you don't fit into those categories, then you are subject to the 10-year rule. And again, FP Pathfinders has some nice charts to help you like process this, because with so many changes over the last several years, there are a number of options, particularly for the surviving spouse. So don't get sloppy on this. Secure Act 2.0 created another option for the surviving spouse as to how to take the IRA. And then there are a number of options already available. And you want to make sure that you're making a good decision here based on your client's needs, based on the size of the account, your client's age. And so I would tell you, everybody should have a process in place as to how to analyze when you have a surviving spouse or a widow, how to analyze the IRA, and whether you want to roll that over, make it a Benny IRA, step into the shoes of the deceased spouse, courtesy of 2.0, right? A lot of options. And again, FP Pathfinders has some nice charts that you can then build your process around that. All right. The fifth of the five tax gotchas is estate planning is getting trickier and trickier. And this is really interesting, actually, because for years, we haven't had to worry about estate planning in any major way because we had, a $27 million lifetime exclusion for a couple. And let's face it, $27 million of a lifetime exclusion for a couple pretty much covers most of our clients. And by the way, the few clients that are over that $27 million, with a few quick and easy tricks, you might be able to get them beneath that, right? Maybe you set up a life insurance trust if they have a large life insurance policy. Maybe you put the house into a QPERT, right? You can do that, house in a vacation home, right? So even if they're over that $27 million, a few tricks and you get them under the 27, right? Okay. So for the most part, we're not really talking about estate planning, at least when we talk on the federal level. Now, we still have about 15 states that have inheritance taxes or state estate taxes, right? State estate taxes or inheritance taxes for the states. And it's about 15 to 20. And so you still need to be very sensitive to the state for your client that they're domiciled in and whether that's going to be an issue. For example, New York, right? New York has a cliff tax if you're over like $6 million or so. I mean, that's crazy for New York. And when you see folks relocating from New York now down to Florida, that's one of the main reasons. Okay. So you see some of these states, Massachusetts has one as well. So some states, not so friendly when it comes to this. All right. Even New Jersey has an inheritance tax, by the way. And we had a client come to us several years ago who was a partner with, believe it or not, an attorney. And because they never formalized their commitment, she had to pay close to $2 million in New Jersey inheritance taxes. So it does get you. All right. It does get you. So always look at the state of domicile. Don't get sloppy just thinking about the federal because the states can get you too. But anyway, having said that, for the most part, for years, we haven't had to worry about the federal. Now, all of a sudden, again, courtesy of TCJA sunsetting, what's back on the table potentially is that $13.6 million. It's grown through inflation. And if TCJA sunsets and they do not reinstate these very generous lifetime exclusions, then it could drop back down to $7 million. And now all of a sudden, $7 million, particularly if somebody's single, That's might not be a ton of money. And now all of a sudden you are back to engaging in estate planning conversations. And it's sort of interesting in a way because when I talk to young practitioners and they've only been practicing, let's say 10 years or so, like this is not a part of their repertoire, right? They haven't really had to think about this. I've had to think about this because 15, 20, 25 years ago, the lifetime exclusion was literally like $1.5 million, $1 million. And particularly in the Northeast, many folks exceeded that number. And so we had to do aggressive planning, 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But over the last decade or so, not so much. And so we may have to dust off, our estate planning tricks and pull them back out. Also for your clients, then, here's what I think of is if they're in the splash zone is what I call it. And the splash zone is, hey, they would be in jeopardy if that lifetime exclusion got cut in half, right? They would be in jeopardy. So that would be a couple, let's say at $13 million. That would be somebody who's single at $6 or $7 million, right? If they're in that splash zone is what I call it. And if they were going to give it away anyway, right? We were going to do some gifting. We were going to do some trust. We were going to do some, interfamily loans, right? We were going to put the house into a QPER. If they were going to do it anyway, but of course didn't feel any sense of urgency because they had a $27 million exclusion. I get that. Maybe we sit down with them and have this conversation, right? And maybe we move some assets out of the estate. Not all of them. I'm not saying take that, $30 million estate and give away $20 million so they're back down to $10 million and we have nothing to worry about. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, first of all, you must have a conversation, right? Like they need to know what the risks are, okay? And if they have an estate that's that large, they're probably pretty sophisticated. They should be able to handle this type of conversation. So I would tell you, you absolutely must have the conversation with them. And I think you need to outline the risks involved with doing nothing, okay? That TCJA is going to sunset, that the Democrats do want to cut that lifetime exclusion, that you have no ability to predict what's going to happen, that a lot of this could happen near the end of the year when you don't have a lot of time to put in place these trusts, that these estate planning attorneys are already getting booked up and are already backed up. And maybe if we were going to do this anyway, maybe we go to some of the low hanging fruit, is what I call it. Maybe we put in place a SLAP. Maybe we set up the QPER, right? So maybe we take care of some of this low hanging fruit and maybe just, glide a few assets out of the estate, but also have that conversation and also be ready so that if things start going directionally against us, like the Democrats get in power, they start beating this drum about, yes, we're going to lessen the lifetime exclusion. It favors the rich too much, et cetera, right? Is that you're ready to then go deeper and make bigger cuts and bigger transfers if need be. Okay. But everybody should be having this conversation with their clients. You should be sending announcements out to your clients. You should be educating them, having one-on-one conversations with folks in the splash zone is what I call it. And maybe we go after some low-hanging fruit. All right. Now, there was an article last week in the Wall Street Journal on this, and they're like, hey, we've talked with clients already, and we had already put some of these things in place, and now the clients regret it. And then other folks are like, well, we put them in place because we want some preventive measures, right? And so this is very client by client, right? Very client by client. Some clients are like, something, we were going to do this anyway. So like, let's get a move on. Other clients want to maintain control to the bitter end, but you're not going to know the answers unless you have these conversations. And the last thing you want is not to have the conversations and then have a problem, right? So these are the 5 tax gotchas. And I think they're very powerful in talking to clients. And what I recommend is that you create your own version of how you handle tax planning, the things that your clients need to be talking about and thinking about. And this is something be ready then to present to your prospects and to your clients so they understand what they're up against and how you're going to help them. All right. One of the ways that we can help here, and oh yeah, okay, yes, we have a poll. Do you place faster growing investments in Roth accounts? Obviously, these are softball questions here. All right. So everybody's going to get this right. And then we're going to hop into particularly helping some of your younger clients so that they are not having the issues at the back end that need to be unraveled. Because that's one of the things that comes up is, hey, like, what do we do for those younger clients, Debbie? We don't have a lot of options. And I'm like, no, yes, you do have options, right? And so what's our results there? Of course, of course. Okay, the few people that answered no, I'm going to assume that you hit the wrong button. Okay, all right. So I'm going to assume you hit the wrong button. All right, so let's hop in here. So for those clients that are younger, right, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So when you have those clients in their 20s, 30s, 40s, right, is let's set things up so you're not showing up when they're in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and sometimes in their 90s, having to unravel decades of bad decisions. And I'm going to give you an example. Is at my firm, and we have 10 of us working there. And I happen to see every single person is doing Roth 401k contributions. Okay, every single person. That is because we sit here, we talk about this day in and day out. They see the analysis, they see the taxes that clients are going to pay, and they realize, hey, we want to set this thing up right. Same thing with my 3 children, all in Roth 401ks, right? Think about it. They have such a long runway. How amazing an opportunity for growth that they fund Roth 401ks, Roth IRAs, and then let them grow for decades, right? So real opportunities there. So what are we going to try to do then is we're going to try to work with these younger clients and set up tax diversification. Now, they're going to fight you on it. All right. I'm going to tell you that right now. So those clients in their 40s and 50s, they love that tax deferral. But more importantly, they love those pre-tax dollars going in that they're not going to get taxed on that extra $10,000 or $20,000 that's going into that 401k. So they're going to fight you on it. And so what you're going to need to do is model this out, which we've done. And we're going to show you an example of this. So don't think you're going to be able to walk in there and be like, hey, you're going to give up that pre-tax and you're going to end up paying more taxes now. You're going to have to model this out, but that's okay. We have software that helps us to do that. Asset location is critical. We're going to show you an example. I think asset location is the unsung hero of tax planning. And we're going to show you an example of just easily moving some assets around, and how that can, over time, create hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings. And then distribution planning. Here's how I want you to think about this is you always want to start with the end in mind. And here's how I explain it. When I sit down for dinner, the first thing I look at is the dessert menu. Okay, I want to know what's coming at the end, and then I make my decisions now about what's coming at the end. Okay, because I love my desserts. Same thing here is you need to think about the end in mind. And if you've got 2 clients and they're putting away $50,000 a year between the 2 of them into traditional 401ks, and maybe they're even doing traditional IRAs also, right? They could literally be up to $60,000 or $70,000 a year in traditional 401ks and retirement accounts. Just think about that. $60,000 a year, year after year after year after year. It doesn't take a long time for that money to grow to 500, $1 million, $1.5 million when you're factoring decades and you're factoring compounded returns. When you then take that and you run it through your accumulation software and you see, oh my gosh, that means you're going to have a $3 million traditional account, okay, at retirement. Oh my gosh, that means you're going to have $150,000 in RMDs their first year. That means that they're going to be at a tax rate of whatever. When you look at those numbers and you can see that in your accumulation software, then you're like, holy cow, we need to do something now about that. So always start with the end in mind. And the challenge is for years, people didn't do that. They were just told, plug money into your traditional 401k. You're going to be in a lower tax rate at retirement, and that's when you can take it out. And that's just wrong for these wealthier clients. It's just wrong. And people are living longer and they're working longer, and they're not going to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement for many of them. Some will, but not all of them. You cannot take that for granted. And yet, for some reason, that has been pounded in their heads. And so they're like, traditional 401k, traditional IRA. You've got to model this out. You've got to show them. If you keep doing this, then in 30 or 40 years, you're going to be in a 35% tax bracket. You're going to have $250,000 of RMDs on top of those big Social Security numbers, right? You're going to have to show them to debunk the myth, essentially. All right, let's hop on to the next slide. So we talked about this, right? Is we want tax diversification. We want options, right? We want options because then in retirement, again, thinking about the end in mind, we want to be able to cobble together. Oh, this year, let's do mostly Roth distribution, couple that with some traditional IRA, or take some from the taxable account because it's high basis, right? But we need options. And if all we're doing is pushing money into traditional IRA and traditional 401k, and I've seen this, clients have come to me with literally $2 or $3 million in traditional retirement accounts and no other money in other accounts. And all that becomes is a negative feedback loop where every time they need a dollar, they got to take out $1.40 because they're paying taxes on that. We do not want our clients to end up in that situation. The next thing is thinking about Roth accounts as your Swiss Army knife, right? So just as a Swiss Army knife can do like 50 things, your Roth account can do so many things in the right hands. And so we know all the obvious ones, growing tax-free, no RMDs, but it's also an estate planning tool because you are prepaying taxes from your estate and then passing on to your heirs. You've already paid the income taxes for them, and you got those taxes out of your estate, driving down the value of your estate. So it's a great estate planning tool, particularly if we have to start worrying again about estate taxes. Generational planning, right? Aside from even the state taxes, is now your kids are not inheriting a traditional IRA that they've got to draw down to zero in 10 years, which will likely push them into the highest tax bracket. And also, again, having Roth IRA, when you're taking those distributions, it helps you with those AGI dependent deductions like medical, subject to 7.5% of AGI. Helps you with Medicare IRMA, right? Drives those down because your AGI is lower. So a lot of positive byproducts from leveraging the Roth. Going to the next slide then is how to think about this. So good tax planning is paying taxes at your lowest lifetime rate. It's not just mindlessly pushing out taxes for as long as possible. That's what the tax preparer says, right? That is not tax planning. That is a tax preparer, and that's small ball because they're just looking at today. You're looking at years. And by the way, taxes, lifetime taxes for your clients could be their largest expense in retirement. So you want to then again project out, look at what the lifetime tax rates will be. And if they're going to be higher down the road, then we need to take advantage of the lower rates today. Let's go to the next slide where I show you why asset location is critical. And it's different than asset allocation. And here's a great example. So these clients paid nothing in additional taxes to do this, okay? They just changed the allocation within the Roth IRA and the traditional IRA. That's all we did. Instead of being, hey, I'm 70-30, so I'm going to be 70-30 here and 70-30 there, right? My Roth IRA and my traditional IRA. Instead, you said, hey, we're going to be all equity in our Roth IRA, but on our traditional IRA, we're going to be a little bit more conservative. We kept the same ultimate mix, right? The same ultimate mix. And look at the difference here. We have $600,000 more in the Roth IRA, which, by the way, will save probably $200,000 to $300,000 in taxes, at least 200, right? And then we drove down the traditional IRA so that when you're taking money out, less of it has to come from the traditional IRA, probably also saving you another $100,000 to $200,000 in taxes. So literally just monkeying around with the allocation within the traditional and Roth 401k saves these clients probably several $100,000. Now, something to think about is we have access to Pantera. It allows us to manage 401ks and get paid for it. This is a great example about how your involvement can justify that fee. Third is engaging in sophisticated distribution planning. I am like jumble lips, I think. No. So if we look at this, and this is like so simple, and I'm not saying that this is the example that you would like necessarily use, but just to make the point, we said 10 years, $100,000 a year. Now your analysis is going to be way more sophisticated than that, but just to take something simple and look at what we get, a $9 million Roth account. Why? Two things. T squared is what I call it. Time, right? Time is this widow is what, 65 or 60, and it goes to age 95, 35 years of compounding, right? Time and brilliant tax planning, T squared, time and tax planning. And with that, then these seemingly minor $100,000 conversions a year can get you a $9 million Roth down the road. right? Super powerful, and driving down the traditional IRA. All right, next slide. Little poll. Do you consider Roth conversions for every client? Now, this one's going to be interesting because I don't think this one is such an obvious one. And so curious, and everyone be honest. Tell me what you're really doing. All right, what do we got here? Yeah, it's about 50-50. Yeah, 50-50. So let's talk about that because there are opportunities for Roth conversions almost for every level of client. Okay. And again, this is where the software enables you to do things that in the past you wouldn't. In the past, you'd say, oh, I'm only looking at this for A clients. I'm only looking at this for clients that have over, $2 million in a traditional IRA, right? Because I heard Debbie talk about that, right? The technology, what's so beautiful about the technology, it enables us to bring amazing quality services to all of our clients. And so with that, then I'm going to hand it over to Caroline, considering tax reviews and Roth conversions for every client and talking a little bit about tax report 2.0 and how we do some of this distribution planning. So with that, Caroline, take it away.
Thanks so much, Debbie. So yeah, we're considering tax reviews and Roth conversions for every client. And Holistiplan has made performing a tax analysis, it's never been easier. In the past, it was really manual. There could be a lot of errors. You might have to have a specialized person on your staff do it. Holistiplan's made it that really just quickly uploading the tax return, you can do it for all of your clients. We have over 100 households. By the end of the year, we get maybe like 90+% of our clients' tax returns uploaded through just following up with them. And we're able to do this because it only takes a couple minutes of just uploading per tax return. And we're also going to be going into tax return 2.0. So,
Caroline, how many times do we follow up to get the tax return?
oh, literally at least like 13 or 14 times. It's crazy. Some of those become individual like reach outs, which is absolutely insane. So hopefully everyone can see my screen here. I just want to quickly show everyone how to enable the tax report 2.0. So you go into settings and then into security settings, and you have to click this little toggle here. You've got to be the firm administrator, and that is how you enable it in 2.0. And then in households, we'll go into Darla. You just click report, and right now you can just click into the tax report 2.0 and see some really cool features. So I'm just going to go over some of those. They've kind of rearranged the key figures up here so it's even more user friendly and available to see. And then they show you your tax breakdown. So they show you the tax on ordinary income versus the tax on long-term gains and qualified dividends. And again, we know clients love a visual. They love to be able to see these things and see kind of where their taxes are getting paid and on what. And it's even good for you as the advisor to kind of know for clients where that's coming from. And visuals just make it a lot easier to also explain these things. I am a visual learner, so I definitely feel that way. And then when we go down to marginal tax brackets, there's also this really helpful ordinary income little bracket that shows how close they are to some of these different little percentiles, and that can show you how close you are to being over under different little tax brackets. So that's really exciting. Again, here, marginal tax brackets in taxable income, they do a very similar thing. So you can also just see that really easily. And this is just it's just a very clean software. Like the colors are clean, like the visuals are clean, like the font's great, like big size. It's just like those things really do make a difference when you're presenting things to clients and you want them to see like a great software. And similar to Social Security, you again have this chart and it shows you the taxation of Social Security, the taxable percentage, the income threshold, and then your taxable percentage. They do this for Schedule A. They list Schedule B, which we will get into later. And then down here, which is really cool, is they show you the tax efficiency of your investment income. And so, different types of investment income, they're taxed differently. For example, non-qualified dividends and short-term capital gains taxed at ordinary income at higher rates, while qualified dividends and long-term capital gains are taxed at more preferential and lower rates. So this is just a great way to see different ways that these things are broken out. And so, yeah, that's just a quick overview of the tax report. And now I'm going to go back into some of the slides, which also explain this. So I think, showing you and everyone the enabling, and then reviewing the tax breakdown. So like we said, you can see the tax breakdown and it shows different forms of taxable income, ordinary income, and qualified income, as well as other kinds of taxes. And then, as I showed, you can see the tax efficiency of the investment income. And so it shows the graphical section dedicated to tax efficiency of investment income. And, this is just great for users. You can have a look at the amount of taxable versus tax exempt interest, and net capital gains that are short term versus long term. So that's exciting. And then next, we're going to go into an example of how we use Holistiplan to kind of model some of these Roth conversions and do a Roth conversion analysis. So we demoed this in a lot of detail in the previous month's webinar. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the case studies right now that we have. And if you want to see the previous webinar, we really encourage you to watch it to see how you can exactly do this in the software. So in the first case study, this is really more tax bracket management, but it's still really important. And as we were talking earlier, it's like, okay, like this person's in the 12% tax bracket, like they don't need, and they have a smaller IRA, like they don't necessarily need to perform like Roth conversions or anything like that. But that's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is they're in the lowest tax bracket. Tax brackets probably going to be going higher. You might want to just take advantage and lock in that lower tax bracket while you can. And that's something that we really consider for certain clients. Do a little arbitrage of, maybe they won't go higher, but they probably will. So as a result, we're kind of stealing the Roth conversion is what we call it. And it's just a really great opportunity to save money and show value, because it's like use it or lose it. So for example, in the base case of no Roth conversion, we'll show how much tax they might pay. And then in a small Roth conversion, it doesn't have to be, a lot, we'll show the estimated total tax, and you get even more of a benefit if you perform something like this during a market drawdown. So, you notice that there's been a bit of a pullback. There was a pullback in like late July. That's the time we actually reached out to clients. We were like, hey, do you want to put money in the market? Like, do you want to do a Roth conversion? Like, let's use this as an opportunity. And then you get the benefit of like, doing that work for your clients, locking in those things. And then also, the market's bounced back. And so, now we have that additional wallet share and they have locked in those previous numbers. So you can really do this in like using the 12% tax bracket. That's how we got to that about $20,000 number, is you can solve for max and you can see about where you can get in the tax bracket without pushing the client to the next tax bracket is what we try to do. And we do try to leave a bit of a buffer. So if the solve for max feature says like you can get within, you could technically do a $27,000 Roth conversion, we'll be like, okay, well, things might be slightly different this year. We'll give them a little buffer and we'll do like a $20,000 Roth conversion. And so there is, it's really, Holistiplan's a great starting point in terms of like using the solve for max feature. And then it's also that like human part of being like, okay, like let's give a little buffer. Let's give a little wiggle room. We don't want to cause this client to have a really stressful situation at the year end. That's not good for anyone. And next, this is Debbie's favorite slide. It feels almost sacrilegious that I'm presenting this slide, but you really need to leverage the information within the tax returns to model Roth conversions. And her biggest point on this is to always consider the ghost of Christmas future. That's the horrific looking image you see to the right. It is the scariest ghost of, Christmas past, present, future, but it's look to see what's going to happen in the future. And if you get one thing from this presentation, really get the fact that taxes and tax reports and tax software is all really important, because taxes are constantly changing. They're probably going to go up, and the future looks a little grim, especially if you're not planning for it. So you really need to compare the current tax rate to the future tax rate in retirement, compare the current tax rate to the future tax rate once the widow's penalty kicks in. Kind of dark, but you need to think about these things for your clients because they really don't like to. And then compare the current tax rate to the potential heirs tax rate. And if you believe that the current tax rate is lower than either of these three future tax rates, then a strong argument can be made for a Roth conversion. And that's where our friendly ghost comes in. And now I'm going to skip to the next section because it may be close to Halloween, but it's still a frightening image. So finally, if you want to dig deeper and want to get even more exact on the amount of Roth conversions to do, for example, like doing different numbers of Roth conversions for like the next 10 years, next 20 years, like we do get into that for certain clients. There are two main ways you can do it. You can do it with accumulation software like eMoney and Money Guide Pro to kind of help directionally. And so you can plug numbers into eMoney and Money Guide Pro, and then you can check the future RMDs that are going to be paid and kind of see, and like if you do more Roth conversions, less Roth conversions, like the size of the traditional IRA, larger or smaller, then you can see the difference that it'll make in the future RMDs paid and the future taxes paid. That can be a little manual, a little complicated. Another way is using distribution software. It allows with more precision with like specific Roth conversion amounts. And then you can go back into Holistiplan and you plug those things in on like a yearly basis to see the real impact on the tax report, and potentially model that out to see how much taxes they're going to be paying this current, like upcoming year.
So to just be clear on the distribution software thing, if we just go right back, is on the accumulation software, that is a very crude tool to use when making these Roth conversion recommendations. So if you look into the future and you say, oh, they're going to have a $5 million traditional IRA, there's going to be RMDs of $350,000 at age 85. That's going to have the widow in the 37% tax bracket. And right now, they're in a 22% tax bracket. So we should do Roth conversions up to at least a 35% tax bracket, right? Like that's how that logic goes. But you can see where that's going to be very manual and hard to optimize, right? So directionally, yes, directionally, you're going to be going in the right way, but it's very hard to do it with like precision, okay? And then you keep going back and forth on it, right? Oh, so then if I do the Roth conversion now up to the 35% tax bracket, how does that help me in 40 years? Oh, that helps a little bit, but I'd like it to help a little more. All right, let me do a bigger Roth conversion now. Well, what if I did that Roth conversion next year? Like you could see that this is a huge rabbit hole that you could climb down. So that's where the distribution software comes in. We do use distribution software. It provides an entire extra level of analysis, essentially. And with it, to be clear then, is we start with Holistiplan. We create a base case in Holistiplan. Then we set up the distribution planning software, which will make an optimal recommendation to us, like, oh, do $200,000 Roth conversion this year, do 150 next year, go up to the 32% tax bracket, whatever. Then we go back to Holistiplan and insert, okay, if we did that $100,000 Roth conversion this year, what would the taxes be this year for the client? And then go to the client and communicate our recommendation and what that would cost them. So when you're using the distribution software, it helps you to become more precise in your approach, a little bit more higher conviction. It's very much a three-step process. You start with Holistiplan, you go to the distribution software, and then you go back to Holistiplan to model it out and communicate it to the client. So anyway, I know that there's always a lot of questions on that. And so I just wanted to clarify that. Back to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Debbie. Yeah, and that might sound a little complicated, but thankfully it really isn't, because it's just so easy to plug that, specifically the Holistiplan part. It's so easy to just plug that in. It's really just one number that you're changing, and then everything else will refresh in like the tax report for you. The, difficult part is kind of choosing what software you want to use in conjunction with Holistiplan, and then inputting all that information. And that's why tax bracket management, especially for most clients, is really great, unless you've got a really, really large or complicated client and with a really huge IRA that's going to need to do planning over maybe like decades. And so an example of that would be decreasing the widow's penalty and increasing intergenerational wealth, the large IRA, by converting now. You can see these are people in their late 50s, late 60s, and they have almost a $4 million traditional IRA. So this is where you see a bit more of a complicated situation. And they do have a taxable account balance of $1 million and no Roth balance. So we were able to model out that if you perform Roth conversions from 2023 to 2025 to the 35% tax bracket, about $600,000 a year. And then again, you do Roth conversions about $100K each year from 2026 to 2032, maxing out the 32% tax bracket. That'll amount to about total Roth conversions of about 2.5 million. And then the result will that you'll have an ending Roth balance of 34 million rather than zero. You'll have nothing left in your traditional IRA. So your heirs aren't going to have to pay those huge taxes from that. That'll mean total tax savings of about 8.7 million. So total taxes have been reduced from about 10 million to 2 million to 2 million, because you're not going to be paying those large RMDs. And then, total ending asset value of 34 million rather than 26 million. So when you get up into, much larger traditional IRAs, at our firm, we really think anything above 1.5 million, you're going to have to do some real planning around for the traditional IRAs. You can make a really, really big difference for these clients. So I know we just have a couple minutes left here, so I'm going to rush through this a little bit, but I do think we've talked about it in the past. First of all, are you identifying your clients' outside assets? It's hard. It can be hard to do this. It can be awkward to ask about it. I'll just ask if we can see the poll now so I can quickly go through this. Awesome. So sometimes with clients, they'll have a lot of outside assets through just a couple different places. We have a lot of larger clients. They like to kind of split things up sometimes. And so this is a strategy we've been using to get more of that wallet share, because sometimes they'll know about it, or they'll be like, oh yeah, I really want to keep like $200,000 in like a high yield savings account. And that's just what I'm comfortable with at the moment. And so we've been using Holistiplan to really increase wallet share. So you can use the Schedule B in the tax return to find those hidden assets and kind of back into the fact that they have these other accounts at Vanguard, at Fidelity, at et cetera. If you're not managing them, then you can see, for example, it shows you in the Schedule B income sources where these things are and the money that they're getting from those. And so then if it's like, oh, they're, Bank of America, 500, or Schwab 1250, and you're not managing that, you can kind of extrapolate, given, 5% interest or 1% interest, about how much that could be. And so Holistiplan's really helpful for that, because you can just submit the tax return and then this will come out in the tax report. And we review the Schedule B income sources for each client and look for potentially large accounts that we're not managing. And then we'll proactively reach out to those individual clients with the funds held in the outside accounts, and we'll reach out to them via email. And so, for example, when the market dipped in July, we did this, and we proactively reached out to them saying that they put the cash to work with us during the market downturn. And that, a lot of clients are realizing that the trade with money markets, interest rates are coming down and they're not going to be getting, their 5% anymore. And so, this is a really great time to kind of put that money to work. And so we actually received millions of dollars from existing clients. And that's a lot cheaper than finding new clients just through this project. This is an example of the email. And then there's some bonus material and Q&A for inherited IRAs. Debbie went over this a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of breeze through this. And, here are some key points to remember for inherited IRAs. And now we have the wrap up
And the code,
and code. We love
So,
the code
yeah.
is Debbie Taylor 2024 for 10%.
The code is make a lot of money and service your clients and everybody wins. That's the code. It's a long code, so we just shortened it to Debbie Taylor 2024. So anyway, Caroline, that was absolutely amazing. I think you did a better job than I could have done. So I'm going to stop doing this. And Laura, you're going to be working with Caroline from now on. And anyway, thank you. All right, Laura. And just as an aside, Caroline, went a little bit quickly through the 5 key points to remember inherited IRAs. We did publish that in a previous session. This is based on the July Treasury guidance and IRS guidance on the inherited IRAs. And so, everyone could benefit from reading it or rereading it. And with that, then back to you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Caroline. That was an outstanding presentation. Learned a ton. Super, super helpful. Anything that didn't get answered in the Q&A, we can do a follow-up email response to. But yes, the code, if you're not already a Holistiplan subscriber, the code is Debbie Taylor 2024. That will get you 10% off, which if you know, we don't often offer discounts except in the case of Debbie Taylor. So thank you, everybody. Happy tax planning, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.